1950, a newspaper in England printed the result of a football match. The United States 1, England 0. Editors at several papers assumed it was a printing error. Surely the actual score was meant to read England 10, United States 1. A typesetter must have simply dropped a digit. It was not a typing error. The greatest upset in the history of the World Cup had just happened, and almost nobody, anywhere, was prepared to believe it. To understand the scale of the shock, you have to understand what England represented in 1950. England had invented the modern game of football. The Football Association had written the first formal rules nearly a century earlier. The English Football League was the oldest and most respected in the world. England had simply never bothered entering the World Cup before 1950, partly out of a quiet, unspoken belief that they had nothing to prove against the rest of the world. When England finally agreed to compete, they arrived in Brazil as one of the outright favourites to win the entire tournament. Their squad featured Stanley Mortensen, Tom Finney and Billy Wright, players considered among the finest in the world. Pre-tournament newspapers in England treated qualification from their group as a formality, barely worth discussing. Their first match comfortably won. Their second match, against a country most English football writers had never previously thought about at all, the United States of America. The United States team that travelled to Brazil in 1950 bore almost no resemblance to a professional football operation. Football, what most of the world called football and Americans called soccer, was a minor sport in the United States at the time, overshadowed entirely by baseball, American football and boxing. The national team was assembled, essentially, from whoever was available and willing. The squad included a postal worker, a dishwasher, a teacher, several semi-professional players who worked full-time jobs during the week and played football only in their spare hours. Their goalkeeper, Frank Borghi, drove a hearse for a funeral home back home in St. Louis. They were given almost no chance by anyone, including, reportedly, by some of their own Federation officials. One American newspaper reporter joked before the tournament that the US team's best hope was simply to avoid serious injury before they could go home. The USA squad was managed by Bill Jeffrey, a Scottish-born coach who had emigrated to the United States and built a respected college soccer program at Penn State. Jeffrey was known for his dry humour and his complete lack of illusions about his team's chances. Before the match against England, asked by a reporter what he expected, Jeffrey reportedly said simply, "We have no chance." What Jeffrey did have, however, was a group of players who genuinely believed in each other, even if nobody outside their dressing room believed in them. Several key figures stood out. Joe Gaetjens, a Haitian-born forward playing in New York, Walter Bahr, a schoolteacher and gifted passer, and Borghi in goal, calm under pressure, in a way that belied his unglamorous day job. They did not expect to win, but they were not afraid to try. June 29, 1950, the Estadio Independencia in Belo, Horizonte, Brazil. A modest stadium, nowhere near the size or grandeur of the Maracanã, holding around 10,000 spectators that afternoon. England arrived expecting a routine victory. Their lineup included several first-choice stars, though manager Walter Winterbottom had, in hindsight, perhaps underestimated the opposition slightly by resting a few key players ahead of a tougher fixture expected later in the tournament. From the opening whistle, England dominated possession, just as everybody anticipated. Wave after wave of attacks, shots on goal, corner kicks. England peppered the American goal relentlessly. But Frank Borghi, the hearse driver from St. Louis, was having the game of his life. 37th minute. Walter Bahr, the schoolteacher, picked up the ball roughly 25 yards from the England goal. He struck a speculative, looping shot toward the goal. More hope than precision. The kind of shot players take when nothing else is on. Gaetjens, running toward goal, threw himself at the ball. What happened next has been debated by historians, journalists and the players themselves for over 70 years. Did Gaetjens deliberately head the ball with intention and skill? Or did the ball simply deflect off the side of his head by pure accident, completely changing its direction and wrong-footing the England goalkeeper entirely? Gaetjens himself, for the rest of his life, insisted it was a deliberate header. Several teammates, with affectionate amusement, always suspected otherwise. Whatever the precise mechanics, the result was unambiguous. The ball deflected past England's goalkeeper, Bert Williams, and into the net. The United States led England 1-0. Something unexpected happened in the stands as the match progressed. The Brazilian spectators, who had no particular allegiance to either England or the United States, began cheering enthusiastically for the underdogs. Every American save, every American tackle, every American clearance was met with louder and louder local support. By the closing stages of the match, the crowd was almost entirely behind the unfancied Americans, delighting in the discomfort of England's celebrated stars. When the final whistle blew, several spectators reportedly rushed onto the pitch to embrace the American players, lifting some of them onto their shoulders in spontaneous celebration. England had been beaten not just on the scoreboard, but in the heart of an entire neutral stadium. For the England players and coaching staff, the result was simply incomprehensible. England had dominated almost every statistical measure of the match. Shots, possession, corners, territory, they had hit the woodwork multiple times. They had created chance after chance. By any conventional measure of the sport, England should have won comfortably. They had lost anyway. England's tournament soon ended entirely. They lost their final group match as well, and were eliminated without progressing further. A humiliating exit for a team that had arrived as one of the favourites to win the entire competition. For the American players, the victory brought a brief, intense burst of attention, and then, remarkably, almost total obscurity. Soccer remained a marginal sport in the United States throughout the following decades. There was no professional league capable of capitalising on their achievement. Most of the players returned to their ordinary jobs within weeks of arriving home. Back to the post office, back to teaching, back to driving the hearse. Gaetjens, the scorer of the famous goal, later returned to his native Haiti. His story took a tragic turn. In 1964, amid the brutal political dictatorship of François Duvalier, Gaetjens was arrested for suspected ties to the political opposition and disappeared. He was never seen again. His fate remains, to this day, one of the most haunting, unresolved stories in football history. The match itself, remarkably, was almost entirely forgotten by the wider footballing world for decades. Overshadowed by bigger nations, bigger stories, and America's continued indifference to the sport. Despite being largely forgotten for decades, the result eventually earned a nickname that has endured ever since. Football historians and writers began calling it the miracle on grass, a deliberate echo of the miracle on ice, the famous 1980 Winter Olympics moment when an amateur American ice hockey team defeated the heavily favoured Soviet Union. The comparison was apt. In both cases, a team of amateurs and part-timers had defeated one of the most dominant forces in their sport, against odds so long that almost nobody believed it could actually happen. Until it did. More than 7 decades later, the USA's victory over England in 1950 remains a touchstone for every football upset that follows it. It is frequently cited alongside North Korea's defeat of Italy in 1966 and Senegal's victory over France in 2002 as one of the greatest shocks the World Cup has ever produced. It is a reminder that football, more than almost any other major sport, refuses to guarantee anything based on history, reputation, or resources. A postal worker, a dishwasher, a teacher, and a hearse driver beat the country that invented the game. On a quiet afternoon in Brazil that almost nobody outside that stadium believed had actually happened. Frank Borghi, the goalkeeper who drove a hearse for a living, was once asked in a later interview how it felt to be part of one of football's greatest shots. He reportedly shrugged and said simply, "We just went out and played." A newspaper that nearly printed it as a typo. A goalkeeper who drove a hearse. A goal that may or may not have been intentional. A scorer whose own story ended in tragedy and mystery. The miracle on grass. Still, to this day, one of football's most quietly extraordinary afternoons. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. We publish a new piece of football history every single day. Next time, we travel to 2022, Morocco, the first African nation ever to reach the World Cup semi-finals, defeating Belgium, Spain and Portugal along the way. An unforgettable run. Until then, sometimes the biggest stories in football history are the ones the world almost forgot to tell.